It is 10:47 a.m. just outside Minneapolis. 6 inches of snow covers the ground. A 7-foot, one giant stands by his Ford. He weighs 325 pounds. His size 23 shoes sink deep into the snow. He has 4 NBA rings and $400 million. But today, he is just a man who lost his dog, Diesel. Suddenly, a single mom named Joni appears. She just finished work at 4 a.m. She walked 2 miles in the freezing cold with Diesel. The famous man offers her a warm ride. She looks him in the eye and says, "I will walk." Her pride is stunning. Why would she refuse help from a man who could change her life? What secrets hide behind her bank account of only $14.20? The journey to understand self-respect begins now. Now let's go back 24 hours. Back to where this story really starts. Joni Baxter lived in a small apartment on the edge of town. The building was old. The paint was peeling near the windows. Her unit was only 380 square feet. It had 1 bedroom and a tiny kitchen. At 3:15 in the morning, the heater made a loud clacking sound. It always did that. Joni barely noticed anymore. She had heard that sound for 2 winters straight. Her son, Toby, was 6 years old. He was curled up under 2 thin blankets. His cheeks were flushed. His forehead felt warm to the touch. Joni pressed a damp cloth against his skin. She whispered softly, "You're okay, baby. Mama's here." Toby opened his eyes for a second. He coughed twice. Then he closed his eyes again and drifted back to sleep. Joni checked the clock. It was almost time to leave for work. She worked the 3rd shift at Redline Industrial Laundry. Her shift started at 4 in the morning and ended at noon. She looked at the stack of mail on the counter. On top sat an envelope from the power company. It said her bill was $183.45 past due. Red letters marked the top corner. It said, "Final notice." Joni did not open it again. She already knew what it said. She had read it 3 times already that week. She checked her bank balance on her phone. The screen showed $14.20. That was all she had, until her next paycheck. She looked at her son one more time. She kissed his forehead gently. Then she called her neighbor, Mrs. Brenda Combs, to come sit with him. Mrs. Brenda was 71 years old. She used to teach 3rd grade at a school 2 towns over. Now she spent her days doing crossword puzzles and watching the birds outside her window. "Go on, honey," Mrs. Brenda said. "I've got him." Joni grabbed her thin coat from the hook by the door. It was not made for winter weather. It was made for October, not January. But it was the only coat she owned. She stepped outside into the freezing air. The wind cut through the fabric like it was not even there. She walked 6 blocks to the bus stop. The bus never came on time during snowstorms. Tonight was no different. She waited 11 minutes in the cold before it finally arrived. At the laundry plant, the machines roared all night long. Steam rose from the industrial dryers. The air smelled like bleach and hot cotton. Joni folded sheets for hospitals and hotels across the city. Her hands moved fast. She had folded thousands of sheets over the past 2 years. Her fingers knew the motion without thinking. Her manager was a man named Dale Grimmer. He was in his 50s, with a permanent frown and a clipboard he carried everywhere. He liked rules more than people. At 3:50 a.m., her shift ended early because a machine broke down. Grimmer barked at everyone to go home until the parts arrived. Joni did not argue. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Outside, the snow had gotten heavier. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees below zero. The wind howled between the buildings. Joni started walking home. She always walked when the bus was too far off schedule. It saved her the fare, which she needed for groceries. She pulled her coat tighter around her body. Her breath came out in small white clouds. Her boots crunched against the icy sidewalk. That is when she heard it. A low whimper came from under an abandoned truck near the old warehouse lot. She stopped walking. She listened again. The sound came again, softer this time. Joni crouched down slowly. Her knees ached from the cold concrete. She peered under the truck. There, curled into a tight ball, was the biggest dog she had ever seen. Its fur was matted with ice. Its whole body shook from the cold. The dog was a giant mastiff, easily 130 pounds. But right now, it looked small and terrified. "Hey, buddy," Joni said softly. "Hey there." The dog lifted its head weakly. Its eyes were dark brown and full of fear. It did not growl. It did not move away. Joni noticed a leather collar around its neck. The leather was old and cracked. A metal tag hung from it, but the engraving was worn smooth by weather and time. She could make out one letter. A capital D. Nothing else was readable. Joni thought for a moment. She had no money for a vet. She had barely enough food for herself and Toby. Taking in a massive dog made no sense at all. But she looked into its eyes again. She saw something she recognized. Exhaustion. Fear. The look of something trying to survive one more night. She took off her thin coat. It was the only extra layer she had. She wrapped it gently around the shivering dog's body. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The dog struggled to stand. Its legs were stiff from the cold. Joni helped guide it forward, one careful step at a time. It took nearly 20 minutes to walk 4 blocks home. The dog leaned against her side the whole way. Its massive weight nearly knocked her over twice. When they finally reached her apartment, Mrs. Brenda opened the door. Her eyes went wide at the sight of the enormous animal. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "What in the world is that?" "He was freezing under a truck," Joni said. "I couldn't just leave him." They got the dog inside. It took up almost the entire living room floor. Its tail thumped weakly against the carpet as it finally started to warm up. Toby woke up from the noise. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the dog in amazement. "Is that a bear?" he asked, his small voice full of wonder. Joni laughed for the first time in days. "No, baby. That's a dog. A really, really big dog." Toby crawled closer, slow and careful. The dog lifted its head and gently sniffed his hand. Then it let out a low, happy sigh. "He likes me," Toby whispered, grinning. Joni watched the two of them together. For a moment, she forgot about the unpaid bill. She forgot about her empty bank account. She just watched her son smile. But reality came back fast. A knock came at the door 20 minutes later. It was Rick Dawson, her neighbor from Unit 4C. Rick worked odd jobs around the building. He always seemed to know things before anyone else did. "Whoa," Rick said, staring at the dog. "That's a purebred mastiff. You know what these things go for?" Joni shook her head. She did not care about breeds or prices. "Easy $500, Rick said. "Maybe more. I know a guy who buys dogs like this." No questions asked. $500. That number hit Joni hard. It was almost her entire month's rent. It would cover the power bill and groceries too. For a second, she considered it. Just for a second. Then she looked down at the dog. It had pressed itself close to Toby's leg, like it was trying to protect him. Its eyes were calm now. Trusting. "No," Joni said firmly. "He's not for sale." Rick frowned. "You're turning down easy money for a stray dog?" "He's not a stray," Joni said. "He's just lost. There's a difference." Rick shrugged and walked away, muttering something under his breath. Joni closed the door and locked it. She sat down on the floor next to the dog. She thought about the collar and the single letter D on the worn tag. Mrs. Brenda came over, adjusting her glasses. "Let me see that collar, sweetheart." Joni brought the dog closer. Mrs. Brenda examined the tag carefully under the kitchen light. "There's a phone number here," she said slowly. "Real faint, but I think I can read it." She grabbed her old flip phone and squinted at the tiny numbers. After a few tries, she dialed. The phone rang twice. Then a smooth, deep voice answered. "This is Sherwood Ranch. How can I help you?" Mrs. Brenda's eyebrows shot up. She explained about the dog, the collar, and the missing tag information. The voice on the line grew quiet for a second. Then it said, "That's Diesel. He got out during the storm 2 nights ago. We've been looking everywhere." Mrs. Brenda gave the address. It was a large property about 2 miles outside of town. The man on the phone thanked her and hung up quickly. "Sherwood Ranch," Mrs. Brenda said, setting the phone down. "That's the old Whitfield land. Someone bought it a few years back. Real quiet owner. Real rich, from what I hear." Joni looked at the clock. It was almost 6:30 in the morning. Toby needed to get to school soon, but he was still running a low fever. "You should call the school," Mrs. Brenda said. "Keep him home today. I'll watch him while you take the dog back." Joni hesitated. Walking 2 miles in this weather sounded brutal. But the dog needed to go home. And so did she, eventually. "Take my boots," Mrs. Brenda said. already pulling them from her closet. They're old, but they've got good grip. Better than those thin sneakers you're wearing. Joni pulled the boots on. They were a size too big, but warm and sturdy. Mrs. Brenda also handed her a thermos filled with hot chicken soup. Drink this on the way. You'll need the warmth in your belly. Joni hugged the old woman tightly. Thank you, Mrs. Brenda, for everything. Mrs. Brenda patted her cheek gently. Honey, listen to me. Dignity doesn't cost a thing, but it's the one thing nobody can ever take from you. Joni nodded, holding those words close to her chest. She clipped a makeshift leash made from an old belt onto Diesel's collar. Then she stepped back out into the snow. The walk began just after 7 a.m. The snow had piled up nearly 6 inches deep by then. The wind bit at her exposed cheeks and nose. Diesel walked slowly beside her. His paws were still stiff from the frostbite risk of the night before. Every few hundred feet, he would stop and lift one paw off the ground. I know, buddy, Joni said softly. Almost there. Just keep going. They passed the edge of town, where the sidewalks ended and the open road began. Snowdrifts rose up along the fence lines like small white hills. By the 1-mile mark, Diesel was limping badly. Joni crouched down and rubbed his front paws between her gloved hands, trying to bring back circulation. Come on, she whispered. You're doing great. We're halfway there. She half-carried, half-guided the massive dog the rest of the way. Her arms burned from the weight. Her legs felt numb from the cold. Finally, she saw it in the distance. A long wooden fence stretched along the property line. Beyond it stood a large farmhouse, with smoke curling from the chimney. Near the gate stood a black Ford truck, and beside it stood the biggest man Joni had ever seen in her life. He was easily 7 feet tall. His shoulders were massive, wrapped in a plain gray hoodie. His boots looked custom-made, far larger than any normal size. As Joni and Diesel approached, the giant man's face lit up with pure relief. Diesel, he called out, his deep voice carrying across the snow. There you are, buddy. The dog's tail wagged furiously. He pulled forward, dragging Joni the last few steps toward the man. The man knelt down, which took real effort given his size. He wrapped his massive arms around the dog's neck. Where have you been, huh? I was worried sick. Then he looked up at Joni. His eyes were kind but curious. Ma'am, thank you. Seriously, you have no idea what this means to me. He was freezing under a truck, Joni said, her voice shaking slightly from the cold. I couldn't just leave him there. The man stood up slowly, towering over her. Up close, he looked even bigger. His hands alone seemed the size of dinner plates. You walked all this way? In this weather? He asked, studying her thin frame and reddened cheeks. Joni nodded. It wasn't that far. It's 2 miles, the man said. In 12 below wind chill. That's not nothing. He gestured toward his truck. Let me give you a ride back into town. It's the least I can do. Joni looked at the warm truck. She could see the heat still fogging up the windows slightly. Her feet were numb inside Mrs. Brenda's borrowed boots. Every part of her body wanted to say yes. But something else, something deeper, held her back. She thought about Rick's offer. $500 for a dog. That was never hers to sell. She thought about the pity she sometimes saw in people's eyes. She did not know who this man was. She did not care about his money or his truck. She only knew one thing for certain. She had not returned the dog for a reward. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. I'll walk, Joni said quietly, looking him straight in the eye. The man blinked, clearly caught off guard. You sure? It's freezing out here. I'm sure, she said. Thank you, though. She turned around and started walking back down the long road, her boots crunching against the fresh snow. The man stood there in stunned silence, watching her small figure grow smaller against the white landscape. He had offered rides to plenty of people before. Nobody had ever said no like that. His name was Shaquille O'Neal, though almost nobody in this small Minnesota town knew that yet. He had bought Sherwood Ranch 3 years earlier, looking for peace and quiet after decades in the spotlight. He rubbed Diesel's head thoughtfully. Who was that, buddy? Diesel just wagged his tail and pressed against his owner's leg, happy to finally be home. Shaq watched Joni's figure disappear around the bend in the road. Something about her stayed with him the rest of that day. He could not shake the image of her walking away, refusing help she clearly needed. That evening, Back at Redline Industrial Laundry, Joni clocked in for her shift, exhausted from the long walk. Dale Grimmer met her at the time clock, with his usual scowl. "You're 4 minutes late," Grimmer said, tapping his clipboard. "I know," Joni said. "I had an emergency this morning." "Emergencies don't pay the bills around here," Grimmer snapped. "I'm docking you a quarter hour." Joni wanted to argue. A quarter hour of pay meant almost $4, money she desperately needed. But she swallowed her frustration and walked to her station, without another word. Meanwhile, at Sherwood Ranch, Shaq could not stop thinking about the woman in the thin coat. He mentioned it to his ranch hand, an older man named Walt. 2 miles, Walt. In this cold. And she just walked off like it was nothing. Walt shrugged. Some folks got more pride than sense. "No," Shaq said slowly. "I don't think that's it. I think she's protecting something." The next evening, Shaq drove into town. He wore an old hoodie, and a plain baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He parked outside a small coffee shop across the street from Redline Industrial Laundry. He sat by the window, with a cheap cup of black coffee, watching the laundry plant's lit-up windows. He was not trying to spy. He just wanted to understand. He saw her, through the glass, folding sheets with quick, practiced hands. Even from a distance, he could tell she was running on empty. Over the next few days, Shaq learned more, without ever asking Joni directly. He struck up a friendly conversation with Mrs. Brenda at the local grocery store, pretending to be new in town. Mrs. Brenda, always happy to chat, mentioned Joni's situation freely. She talked about Joni's husband, who had passed away 2 years earlier from a sudden heart condition. She talked about the medical bills that came after, bills that ate up every spare dollar Joni had. "That girl works herself to the bone, Mrs. Brenda said, shaking her head. "Never asks anybody for a dime, though. Too proud for that." Shaq listened carefully, filing away every detail. He said nothing about who he was. He simply thanked her for the conversation and left. Back at the ranch, he sat by the fireplace, that night, thinking. Diesel rested his massive head on Shaq's knee, sensing something was on his owner's mind. "She reminds me of my mom," Shaq said quietly to the dog. "Lucille never asked anybody for anything either, not even when we had nothing." He thought back to Newark, decades earlier. He remembered the tight budget, the second-hand clothes, the way his mother stretched every dollar until it nearly snapped. He remembered how she always found a way to buy him shoes, even when his feet outgrew them every few months. He decided then that he would not offer Joni money. Money would only insult someone like her. He needed a different approach entirely. The following week brought more trouble for Joni. On a Tuesday morning, right as her shift ended, Grimmer called her into his cramped office. "We've got a problem," Grimmer said, his voice cold. "Machine 6 is broken. Says here you were the last one running it." Joni's stomach dropped. "I ran a load through it, but I didn't break it. It was making a strange noise before I even started." "That machine's worth $12,000, Grimmer said. "Someone's going to pay for the repair, and it sure isn't going to be me." "I can't pay for that," Joni said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't do anything wrong." Grimmer leaned back in his chair. "Then you'll work extra shifts, unpaid, until it's covered. Or I find someone else who's willing to." Joni felt her chest tighten. She thought about Toby, about the power bill, about how she could not afford to lose this job. But she also knew she had not broken that machine. Just then, the office door creaked open. A tall figure in gray coveralls stepped inside, ducking his head to fit through the doorway. "Excuse me," the man said. "I couldn't help but overhear." Grimmer squinted up at him. "Who are you?" "This is a private conversation." "Name's Shaq," the man said simply, not offering a last name. "I'm here about the machine." He walked over to machine 6, which sat silent and dark near the back wall. He crouched down, examining the control panel, with careful, practiced hands. Joni watched, confused. This was the same man from the ranch. But he looked completely different now, dressed like any ordinary repairman. "This isn't a new problem," Shaq said, still examining the wiring. "Look here. This belt's been fraying for weeks. Anybody running this machine would have triggered the same shutdown." He pulled a small panel loose and pointed to a worn rubber belt inside. "See that? That's old wear and tear, not something one person did in one shift." Grimmer's face turned red. That's not possible. I checked that machine myself. With respect, Shaq said calmly. You might want to check it again. Within 5 minutes, Shaq had the belt replaced with a spare part he had brought from his own truck. The machine roared back to life, humming normally once more. The other workers in the laundry room had gathered to watch, whispering among themselves. Grimmer stood frozen, unsure of what to say. She didn't break your machine, Shaq said, turning to face Grimmer directly. And she's not paying for something. That wasn't her fault. Grimmer opened his mouth, then closed it again. He clearly did not know how to respond to this stranger who had just solved his problem in minutes. Joni stared at Shaq, her mind racing. Anger mixed with confusion inside her chest. You've been watching me, she said quietly, once they stepped outside the building. This whole time, haven't you? Shaq nodded slowly. I have. I'm sorry if that feels wrong. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Then what were you trying to do? Joni asked, her voice sharp with hurt. Feel sorry for the poor single mom? Is that it? No, Shaq said firmly. That's not it at all. He gestured toward a wooden bench near the parking lot, worn smooth from years of use. Can we sit for a minute? I want to explain something. Joni hesitated, then sat down, keeping several feet of distance between them. I grew up in Newark, Shaq began. My mom, Lucille, raised us with almost nothing. There were nights we didn't know if there'd be dinner. Joni listened, her arms crossed tightly against the cold. My feet grew fast, Shaq continued. By the time I was 13, I already needed a size 16 shoe. My mom worked double shifts just to keep me in shoes that fit. He paused, looking down at his own massive boots. She never once asked anybody for help, not even when people offered. Joni's expression softened slightly, though she still looked wary. When I saw you walk away from that ride, Shaq said, something in me recognized that. The same fire my mother had. The same refusal to be pitted. So this is about your mom? Joni asked. Partly, Shaq admitted. But it's also about respect. You earned that dog's safe return. You earn my gratitude. What you do with that is up to you. He reached into his coverall pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He held it out to her. This isn't charity, he said. It's a real job offer. Manager position, full benefits, at a store I'm opening downtown. You'd be running the place, not sweeping floors. Joni stared at the paper, without taking it. Why would you offer me that? You don't even know me. I know enough, Shaq said. I know you walked 2 miles in freezing weather to return a dog. That wasn't yours to keep. I know you turned down easy money from your neighbor. That tells me plenty. Joni's eyes stung with unexpected tears. She blinked them back quickly, unwilling to cry in front of a stranger. I don't need pity, she said quietly. This isn't pity, Shaq replied. This is respect. There's a difference, and I think you know it. She finally took the paper from his hand, still not fully trusting the situation. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket without reading it. I'll think about it, she said. Shaq nodded, satisfied with that answer for now. That's all I'm asking. But the peace of that moment did not last long. Word had already begun to spread through the small laundry plant about the mysterious stranger who fixed machines and defended employees. Grimmer, humiliated and furious, decided to take matters into his own hands. That same afternoon, he called the local police department, claiming a trespasser had broken into the building and tampered with company property. 2 officers arrived at Sherwood Ranch just after 5 p.m., lights flashing against the snowy driveway. Shaq answered the door calmly, Diesel barking once, before settling down beside him. Sir, we've got a report of trespassing and equipment tampering at Redline Industrial Laundry, the younger officer said, flipping open a small notebook. The older officer studied Shaq's face for a long moment. Then his eyes widened slightly. Wait a second, aren't you? Shaquille O'Neal, the younger officer finished, his jaw dropping. You're Shaq. The Shaq. Shaq gave a small, tired smile. Guilty as charged. The younger officer's stern expression melted instantly into starstruck excitement. I grew up watching you play, man. This is unbelievable. But Shaq's expression remained calm and serious. I appreciate that. But right now, I'm more concerned about your report. A woman named Joni Baxter is being falsely accused of damaging property she never touched. He explained the situation clearly and calmly, describing the worn belt and the obvious mechanical failure. He offered to show them the old part, still sitting in his truck bed. The officers examined the evidence and quickly realized there was no case against Joni or against Shaq. The complaint from Grimmer began to look more like retaliation than a legitimate concern. Word of Shaq's true identity spread through the small town within hours. By the next morning, people were gathering outside Red Line Industrial Laundry, hoping for a glimpse of the famous basketball star. Joni felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Reporters from a local news station showed up, asking questions about the NBA legend helping the working poor. She hated the framing immediately. "I don't want to be a story," she told Shaq when he stopped by to check on her. "I don't want people thinking I need saving." "You're not being saved," Shaq said firmly. "You're just being seen." There's a difference. Still, the pressure of sudden fame weighed heavily on her. She worried about Toby, about her privacy, about being labeled the poor single mom in every headline. That night, exhausted from the chaos, Joni sat at her kitchen table staring at the folded job offer still in her coat pocket. She had not opened it yet. Part of her was afraid of what accepting it might mean. Around 9 p.m., disaster struck without warning. The old heater in her apartment, the one that had clacked every night for 2 winters, finally gave out completely. Sparks shot from the wall outlet behind it. Within minutes, smoke began filling the small apartment. Joni grabbed Toby from his bed, coughing hard as thick smoke stung her eyes. She got as far as the hallway before realizing something terrible. In her panic, she had left behind the small wooden box containing her late husband's belongings, tucked under the bed. "Toby, stay right here," she shouted, pushing her son toward Mrs. Brenda's open door across the hall. "Do not move." She turned back toward the smoke-filled apartment, her heart pounding with fear and determination. But before she could take another step, a massive figure pushed past her. It was Shaq. He had been driving by to check on Diesel's old rescue route when he saw the smoke pouring from her window. "Stay back," he shouted, ducking his massive frame through the narrow doorway. His shoulders barely fit through the frame. Inside, the smoke was thick and blinding. Shaq dropped low, crawling along the floor where the air was slightly clearer. He found the wooden box exactly where Joni had described it. He also spotted a small stuffed rabbit near Toby's bed, something the boy never slept without. He grabbed both items quickly, his lungs burning from the smoke. Fighting his way back toward the door, his large frame struggled against the narrow hallway walls. For one terrifying second, his shoulder caught against the doorframe, wedging him in place. Joni screamed his name from outside, pure terror in her voice. With one powerful push, Shaq broke free and stumbled out into the hallway, coughing violently. Firefighters arrived moments later, quickly bringing the small blaze under control before it could spread further. The damage was contained mostly to the kitchen wall and the old heating unit. Joni rushed to Shaq's side as he sat on the curb outside, still catching his breath. "You didn't have to do that," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know," Shaq said simply, handing her the wooden box and Toby's stuffed rabbit. "I wanted to." Toby ran over, wrapping his small arms around Shaq's massive leg. "You saved Mr. Bunny," he said, clutching the stuffed animal tightly. Joni looked down at the wooden box in her hands, containing the last pieces of her husband's memory. Then she looked at Shaq, soot-streaked and coughing, sitting on a cold curb because he had chosen to help. Something inside her finally shifted. She realized that refusing every offer of kindness was not strength. It was simply another kind of wall, one that kept her isolated even when help was standing right in front of her. "Let us help you tonight," Shaq said gently. "Just for tonight. Toby needs somewhere warm to sleep, and so do you." This time, Joni did not refuse. She nodded slowly, exhaustion and relief mixing together in her expression. Shaq drove them to Sherwood Ranch that night. Diesel greeted them at the door, tail wagging furiously at the sight of Toby. The boy immediately curled up against the massive dog's side on a thick blanket by the fireplace. Joni sat across from Shaq at the large kitchen table, wrapped in a warm quilt. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to simply rest. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Out of everyone in this town, why did you focus on me? Shaq considered the question carefully before answering. Because you never once asked me for anything, not even when you had every reason to. Over the following weeks, life slowly began to change. Joni officially accepted the manager position at Shaq's new grocery store downtown, a place called Fair Harvest Market. The job came with steady pay, health insurance, and reasonable hours that let her be home for Toby. Her medical debt, from her late husband's care, along with the past due rent, was resolved through an anonymous fund set up by First National Bank. The notice she received in the mail was simple. Her balance had been settled through a program. It supported people who protect their dignity under hardship. There was no direct check, no cash handed over, just quiet paperwork handled through proper legal channels, the way Shaq had planned it from the very beginning. Joni also received something else in that same envelope. It was a small ownership stake in Fair Harvest Market itself. She had earned it by guiding the store's launch. Her steady leadership during those hard first months made the difference. Dale Grimmer, meanwhile, faced consequences of his own. An internal investigation at Redline Industrial Laundry revealed a pattern of unfair treatment towards several employees, not just Joni. He was quietly let go within the month. Spring arrived slowly, that year, melting away the last of the harsh winter snow. Fair Harvest Market flourished under Joni's careful management, becoming a genuine gathering place for the community. 3 months after the fire, Shaq walked into the store on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Diesel trotting happily beside him on his leash. He wore his usual plain hoodie, blending in easily among the other customers. Toby spotted Diesel first, running over with a delighted shout. The massive dog immediately dropped to the floor, letting the boy wrap his arms around his thick neck. Joni watched from behind the front counter, a genuine smile spreading across her face. She had changed in these past months, standing taller, speaking with quiet confidence to her employees and customers alike. Shaq approached the counter, picking up a small loaf of fresh sourdough bread from a nearby display. He set it down gently in front of her. "Just this today," he said, offering a warm smile. Joni rang up the purchase, her fingers steady and sure on the register. "That'll be $4.50. He handed her the exact amount in cash, nothing more, nothing less. No grand gestures, no spotlight, just an ordinary transaction between two people. As he gathered his bread, he paused for a moment, looking at her directly. "This time," he said, a hint of gentle humor in his voice, "can I offer you a ride home?" Joni laughed, a real, easy laugh that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. "I think I can accept that now." Outside, the spring air felt warmer, softer than it had in months. Diesel walked between them as they headed toward the parking lot, Toby skipping ahead, with the stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm. There was no grand celebration, no cameras, no headlines this time. Just two people who had once stood on opposite sides of a snowy road, now walking together towards something quietly, deeply earned. Joni thought back to that freezing morning months earlier, standing outside Sherwood Ranch's gate. She remembered the warmth of the truck she had refused and the cold 2-mile walk she had chosen instead. She did not regret that choice. It had been the thing that proved who she really was, long before anyone offered her anything in return. Respect, she realized, was never about refusing every hand extended toward you. It was about knowing your own worth well enough to accept help, without losing yourself in the process. Shaquille O'Neal had learned something too, standing there in that grocery store parking lot. Real strength was rarely loud. It rarely announced itself with rings or records or bank statements. Sometimes it looked like a woman in a thin coat, walking 2 miles through freezing snow simply because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes it looked like quiet dignity, refusing pity but never refusing genuine respect. As they reached his truck, Shaq opened the passenger door for Joni. Toby climbed into the back seat, Diesel settling beside him, with a contented sigh. Joni paused before getting in, looking up at the tall, gentle giant standing beside her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, not just helping me." Shaq nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "That's the only way I know how to help anybody." The truck pulled away from Fair Harvest Market, disappearing down the quiet street lined with melting snow. Behind them, the store's lights glowed warmly against the fading afternoon sun. It was a small symbol of everything that had changed since that freezing morning in January. 2 miles once separated a desperate walk from a warm offer of help. Now, that same distance simply marked the road home, traveled together, side by side, exactly as it should have been all along.